Coming up on tonight's UAP News Show.
UFOs and the Afterlife. Skywatcher team breaks the silence.
Fighting for health, fighting for truth. Area 51 veterans speak out.
UFOs and nukes. What's the connection?
Dr. Greer, Gary McKinnon, and 0 Point Energy. The fight for disclosure continues.
And a History of USOs Volume 1. Richard Dolan's deep dive into USOs.
Hey there, beautiful souls. It's your girl, Allie, and we are back at it again for another episode of UAP Society's weekly UAP News Show. I am stoked to get started, so without further ado, Justin, say hey.
Greetings, cosmic enthusiasts. It's Justin here. Let's dive right in.
Up first, UFOs and the Afterlife. Skywatcher team breaks the silence. Okay, truth seekers, tonight we're diving into a mind-bending revelation that could change everything we think we know about UFOs, NHIs, and even the afterlife? What?
Yeah.
Afterlife. UFO whistleblower Jake Barber recently shocked the world on News Nation, coming forward with hard-hitting evidence, a video of an egg-shaped UAP, and a team of military witnesses backing him up. But it doesn't stop there. Barber has assembled a special ops team of psionic assets called Skywatcher, dedicated to exposing the secrets of the mysterious visitors. Tonight, we're hearing from one of Skywatcher's own, psionic asset James Hodgkins, someone who allegedly possesses extraordinary mental abilities connected to these entities. But here's where it gets even wilder. Could these UAPs be interdimensional? Could they hold the key to what happens after we die? Could NHI and the afterlife be two sides of the same cosmic coin?
A tweet from Direct Perception says, "Coming from the afterlife. For those following along to better understand psionics, watch the video below. I appreciate their transparency. Is this why Bigelow went from machines to high strangeness to the afterlife? And why Leslie Keane, having the contacts she has, is also focused on the afterlife now? Could these be the ones posing as our deceased relatives during NDEs? Are they the angelic ones convincing us to return to the system to try again? Do they need craft in the afterlife?" To learn more, let's look at a clip from a post-disclosure world video called Inside Skywatcher. Psionic asset James Hodgkins breaks his silence.
I've just completed an interview with James Hodgkins, a member of Skywatcher, whose insights you will not hear anywhere else.
Now, as to answer your question about whether or not this is dangerous, I don't find this to be dangerous myself. I've done this for a long time. Now, the one caveat I always put with this is your own baggage as an individual can be brought into these experiences. And so if you have negative preconceived notions as to what this phenomenon is, it sometimes can manifest in that way. Now, I think the work done in order to integrate those experiences allows for a much richer experience of the phenomenon as a whole.
On your website, you have a website, enia.io. I think Enia, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is Greek and it means 9. But on your website, you have a couple quotes on your website. One of them is, or sentiments. One of them is, what if your thoughts had the ability to shape reality? Not figuratively, but literally. You also have on your website, reality is programmable. We are the programmers. What's your perspective on our thoughts and how in its relationship to reality?
Yeah, so this is a complicated, very fascinating subject. And I think it gets to, all the interest and fear and uncertainty around human initiated contact experiences as to, what are these craft? What is being manifested? And, this still is a largely unknown area. The fact that, thought seems to be accessing some type of field, whether you want to call it the 0 point energy field or, what have you, and be able to manipulate matter and actually have physical results, whether that be seeing something in the sky or some type of tangible craft or material that ends up on the ground. Now, I also don't want to discount the fact that there are biologics that are often involved in these experiences, not always, to be clear, but even our definition of biologics, I think, needs some reinterpretation and openness to new information. There are reports, and Jake talked a little bit about the emotional experiences that he had while flying the helicopter, that not all of these craft are even necessarily occupied, but the craft themselves can be sentient, which is really asking for a redefinition of what life is. And so I guess to get back to the crux of your main question around thoughts being able to manipulate reality, I would argue that this is actually kind of part of the American tradition in a certain way. If you look at Neville Goddard and the New Thought movement, this is something, the power of positive thinking. These are ideas that many people, particularly in the US, have thought, and they've ascribed a Protestant understanding to it, typically Protestant understanding to it, and that's fine. But what you're talking about is your thoughts and your positive intentions influencing reality and getting real world results.
Yeah. So you wrote on X, why should we wait for governments to disclose the truth when the people have the power to do it themselves? What power do we have, in your perspective, to actually get transparency of this phenomenon in terms of our knowledge and understanding without having to wait for governments to open the books?
I think there's a few different ways. First and foremost is individual experience. And all the efforts of Skywatcher aside, my concern is that there's no amount of footage or evidence or proof that can convince everyone. Now, what Skywatcher can do is actually, and Jake has said we're doing this, is host events to actually show the reality of this to individuals. I also think the ability to do this is accessible, not necessarily to everyone, but the people that are willing to put in the work, required to develop the skill, I think they can do this at home. And I really think in order for disclosure to happen, it's going to take a great deal of personal exposure. Once again, we can show the best footage in the world, and I think people are still going to tear it apart. I think you really need that personal firsthand experience. We're going to do our best. We have a lot of plans that are coming over the next few months, but I would, challenge people, if you're going to say that this is impossible, give it a shot first.
Do you think there's something stopping, I'll use the phenomenon, but like you said, it's probably multiple things. Do you think there's something stopping it from engaging us more directly? Because when you think about it, if it's ultra-terrestrials, interdimensional, some of it's coming from other planets, some of it's like angelic, some of it's coming from the afterlife, they all seem to agree that they're not going to force disclosure, at least yet. Do you think there's something like stopping them from actually doing that, some kind of force or hierarchy of intelligences, and they all kind of fall in line? Or do you think they've all kind of agreed that there's a time and a place for disclosure and they're going to do it? They're not going to like one species or whatever is not going to do it before the hierarchy agrees it's best. What do you think?
Yeah, that kind of Star Trek idea of the prime directive that they can't, interfere directly with us. I don't know. My own personal opinion, I would say that makes sense to me, that there is some type of understanding that humanity needs to come to this on its own. Now, once again, diversity, that's not to say everyone's, going to agree with that. It's the same thing, when you're a kid, don't go there, it has no trespassing signs. Well, what are you going to do? Teenagers are going to go check it out and see what happens there. And so I think that might be something we're dealing with is these are potentially just, kind of more individuals as opposed to some organized systemic response.
James, this has been a great interview. As an ending or closing question, what is Skywatcher's number one objective that you would like to accomplish?
Yeah, so the number one objective over the next year, and really for 2025, I'll shorten it a couple months, is to demonstrate this for a diverse group of people in a way that cannot be brushed off. By diverse group of people, I mean not taking a whole bunch of people like me or you that are already large believers in these topics, but people that have publicly expressed that they don't think that this is possible, or that, you know, there is no reality to this. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. That's that aha moment where, you know, I feel like people will actually grow to accept this, because once again, we're going to show you the video. We will show you as much as we can, but there's always going to be a subset of people that say that's not compelling, that's AI generated. And so fine, you know, we'll show it to you in the real world.
I hope the first person that they sign up to bring to a Skywatcher event
is
Mick
West.
Yes. Because there is a lot of truth to that, like no matter how many pictures you show somebody, no matter how many videos you put in front of them, no matter how many personal experiencers that share their accounts with you, there's still going to be the people that be like, yeah, okay, but. The only thing that can like take that but out of the equation is for them to have their own personal experience, because once you have that personal experience, the ontological shock
you
hits
can't deny it. It's hard to deny.
You can't deny what happens. Your whole paradigm changes. Everything you thought you knew is out the window, and all of a sudden there's a whole brand new reality in front of you that you have to learn to integrate and work through. And I mean, I totally agree with him. And to answer or to reply to Ryan's question about, you know, CE5, is it dangerous? You know, is heist dangerous? I really feel the need to say that you have to be ready to do these kinds of things. Okay. And when I say ready, I don't just mean like, yeah, let's fucking go, I'm ready. I mean, like, you gotta be right in your mind, you gotta be right in your heart, and you gotta be like that kind of ready. Like, in other words, you have to have an open heart, full of love, full of gratitude. Your mind has to be non-egotistical. Like, you can't show up to a CE5 event going, oh, I'm going to make these aliens show themselves, and I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Like, you can't go in with, like, a domineering kind of, like, egotistical, like...
I feel like it's important to say that you also can't go in with with your mind made up that this is all BS. And you're going to show that it's BS.
Right. Because not only are you going to functify the energy of the group, but they're just literally not going to show themselves to you.
Right. Exactly.
They're just not. They're just not.
You have to keep an open mind, for sure.
Right. Absolutely. You have to, like, there could be like a whole group of people doing CE5 together, and like 3 will see the same thing and the other 2 won't see anything. And it's all a matter of like what your internal thermostat is set at. Like, where are you at? If you're operating from the mind, straight ego, grr, I'm going to dominate, it ain't going to happen for you. And you shouldn't participate because, like I said earlier, you're going to functify the energy of the group. So you got to be ready for this kind of thing. There was so many points that they brought up during that video. I feel like I'm trying to collect myself. So go ahead and I'll think for a second.
Okay, thank you. Another person I think they should add to that list is Stephen Greenstreet. Oh. So that, you know, he's been one of the biggest proponents of this is bunk. And, you know, you guys are all idiots for believing it. So if he has his own experience, I feel like that could really change his mindset.
Throw Kirkpatrick pants in there too. Shit.
Yeah. You know, but with that being said, I think even if Greenstreet had his own experience, I kind of feel like he might be paid by the CIA or somebody else. Ooh. So I think no matter the experience that he would have, he would still come back and try and...
So you're saying even if he did have a valid, legit experience, because he's getting paid by the CIA, he would still try to, like, say it's a bunch of bunk.
Yeah. Possibly.
That's an interesting thought.
I don't know.
There's so many things that I was thinking while I was watching that clip. I feel like I'm trying to regather my thoughts. However, I can go back to the original tweet that we started with because I had some stuff to say about that too. Okay, so in the original tweet that we just read, they asked you some questions. Let's see. He said, is this why Bigelow went from machines to high strangeness to the afterlife? So if you guys don't know, Bigelow was tied into Skinwalker Ranch. So that's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. If you've never been down that rabbit hole, have fun, bring some popcorn and some water because you're going to be there a minute. And then they said, why Leslie Kean having contacts? She's supposed to be focused on the afterlife now. Leslie Kean, if you guys don't know, I think she wrote a book about NDEs, and she also was featured in an NDE documentary. So that's an interesting tie into this whole thing, because, you know, people that have experienced NDEs have gone beyond the veil. They've come back to tell the story, and they kind of basically say that, like, we're all made of energy, and, like, all these things are just basically the same things, just kind of like with a different title, sort of. Like
And
so there's that.
We've interviewed probably 20 to 30 people that have had an NDE, and all those interviews are over on her channel.
Yes, Hello Allie. Go check it out. Oh,
Living Life Consciously with Hello Allie.
I had to change my name. That's a whole different story. Anyways, okay. So then he said, or they said, I don't know what the gender of this person writing this tweet is, but anyways, could these be the ones posing as our deceased relatives during NDEs? I don't really care for that question, because that kind of indicates that the people that people are seeing during their NDEs are not real, or it's like aliens posing as their dead grandma or something. I don't really agree with that. I don't care for that at all, because like my dead grandma, for example, is an energy, and she still does exist somewhere, just as we all do infinitely exist. And I don't like the idea that they're trying to say that like it's an alien posing as a grandma. I don't know. That's personal beef I have. And then they say, are the angelic ones convincing us to return to the system to try again? Don't care for that question either, because that question kind of insinuates that we are in a soul trap, to where as soon as we die and our soul leaves our body, some alien or some evil entity convinces us, oh no, you got to go back and do it again, and then we're back right here on Earth doing it all over again. Indicates soul traps and prison planets. Don't like that either, just because it's like making it seem like it's a trap, and I don't feel like that. I feel like this is all a conscious decision that our souls make, and this is a whole woo conversation. I'm trying to keep it tame for y'all. And then they said, do they need craft in the afterlife? If you know what a Merkaba is, that is allegedly or supposedly a craft made of light that entities that are in energetic form travel in. Now, I don't think it's a nuts and bolts craft made with like steel and rivets and whatever else is. I think it's literally an energetic craft. Go down the Merkaba Google rabbit hole, have fun, let me know when you get back out. Okay. That was a lot, but I feel like there's a lot wrapped up in this story. So yay for Skywatcher. I think it's awesome what they're doing. I think it's awesome the kinds of conversations that people are having because they came out. And please sign up Mick West, Stephen Greenstreet, and Sean Kirkpatrick so that they too can have their own experiences and quit trying to debunk and skepticize everything. There we go.
Okay. If UFOs are connected to the afterlife, what does that mean for our understanding of consciousness? Could non-human intelligence be watching over us from beyond this dimension? Have you ever had an experience that made you question reality, like a UFO sighting or near-death experience? Let us know in the comments section below. Up next, fighting for health, fighting for the truth, Area 51 veterans speak out. Imagine risking your life to defend a country, only for it to turn its back on you when you need it most. This is reality for veterans who served at the mysterious Area 51. The U.S. military's most classified operations were carried out there, and now, many of those who worked at the base are left fighting for something just as critical, their health. But there's a catch. How do you get the health care you need when the government denies you were ever there? And what about the shocking truth hidden behind those desert hills? In the 1980s, the CIA brought an egg-shaped craft to Area 51. Highly cleared engineers from EG&G couldn't access it, but they came to one startling conclusion. This craft was sent here from another planet. What does this mean for the military personnel who were forced to keep secrets, while now struggling for recognition and care? The story of Area 51 is about more than just UFOs. It's about lives impacted by a truth that is still being hidden in plain sight.
Shout out to Ross Coldhart, because that's his book title, Hidden in Plain Sight, so that was kind of cool.
Right.
And speaking of Ross, News Nation tweeted, they did top secret work at Area 51 and now they're fighting cancer. But how do you get health care when the government says you were never there? Catch Classified Cancer with Natasha tonight at 7 p.m. on Elizabeth Vargas Reports.
Exclusive, we gather a group of veterans in the Nevada desert who all believe they were exposed to radiation during classified missions near Area 51 in the mid-'80s to early '90s. Their work was so top secret, the Department of Defense still won't acknowledge their service in the desert. And they say that's a big problem. News Nation's Natasha Zuvas was the first to break the story and went to the Las Vegas desert as these veterans are getting sick and pleading for the government to help.
They keep us classified to protect themselves.
A group of Air Force veterans and a DoD contractor say they have been sickened, even disfigured, after being stationed in the desert in the mid-'80s to early '90s.
Did you have any idea what you were being exposed to?
None. None of us knew.
These veterans say they served at the Nevada Test and Training Range, which encompasses the infamous Area 51, a remote spot that hosted nuclear testing both underground and atmospheric. Since the 1950s, their work so secret there would be no record that the men ever served in the windswept desert.
It was the technology behind it. That's what we were there to make sure nobody got.
They still can't talk about most of their work on the range, but the one mission they can now disclose, guarding the F-117 Nighthawk, America's first stealth bomber.
We ended the Cold War, truly.
Oh, wow.
The story begins with a reunion barbecue back in 2016 at veteran Dave Creet's Las Vegas home. Air Force buddies who hadn't seen each other in decades make a startling discovery.
So I asked the guys, we're just sitting around drinking beers. I said, you guys, I got this lump on my back. And I don't know, has anybody else got that?
I said, yeah, I had one of those. I had it removed. It was the size of a grapefruit.
6 out of the 8 vets had benign tumors called lipomas. The 7th said, I don't have any, but my son was born with one.
It just kind of confirmed it. There was an issue. Where we were, that's the one common denominator, is we were all there.
A DoD contractor who worked at the base at the same time as these vets sickened.
Daddy took his teeth out first because they had to scrape out a lot of cancer.
They had to scrape out a lot of cancer.
2 cancers, 80% of his tongue removed along with his vocal cords, all of his teeth. He lives on a feeding tube. The veterans tell News Nation their medical claims are being denied by Veterans Affairs. The work so top secret, their records are what's called data masked, as if they were never there.
It's like a kick in the gut. It's just a matter of betrayal.
After learning of the serious health conditions his Air Force brothers were suffering from, Dave did some research on the Nevada test site. Hundreds of nuclear weapons tests were conducted in the area from the 50s until the early 90s. In the 1970s, the government began exploring the idea of building a military installation there to house classified projects. A 1975 Department of Defense environmental report of the area acknowledges nuclear contamination, depleted uranium, beryllium, and plutonium present before the men were sent by the government to the range. But the report says, quote, discontinuing the work done would be against the national interest.
It's one thing to be ignorant, or to be naive, to not know, but they've understood for a long time.
Dave's discoveries led him to create the Invisible Enemy, an advocacy group where he says he's connected with more than 1,000 veterans who served at the Nevada test site. Hundreds of them report being sick.
We were in the dirt all the time. I can recall the times where when we'd perspire, that our uniforms would turn kind of a yellowish orange.
Our government knew that that area was contaminated. So knowing that, and they willfully put us there, that's given somebody a death sentence.
We did something important. We did good work. We changed things. We don't deserve being ignored by saying we don't exist.
Elizabeth, after the DoD had no comment and the Air Force said they don't have information available for that time frame, News Nation went to the VA. And the VA told us there's no presumption of exposure for these veterans who served at the range. These vets will need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis to prove their illness is related to their service. Of course, the vets tell us this is difficult when their data is masked. And time is of the essence, Elizabeth. More than 400 names are already on this memorial list. On Saturday night, we are delving deeper into the ripple effects, the families who are also getting sick. One daughter is exclusively giving News Nation the photographs and the documents her dying mother worked to declassify after her mom said she knew she was exposed. That's Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern on News Nation. Elizabeth.
Wow, that's so messed up. That's so wrong. I really feel like we need to get this message out there. We need to spread this to as many people as possible to try to get something done.
Yeah. I mean, I personally have a right to have a lot of beef with the VA just because both of my grandfathers served in World War II. My brother was in the Air Force, and all of them in some way, shape, or form have been dicked over by the VA in some way, shape, or form.
I think that's the case with most veterans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to cry. Just the length of time it takes for them to get service is like absolutely ridiculous. And then by the time you get service, it's like you have to prove that you're sick to them in order for them to like cover the injuries and the ailments that they sustained and received during their service. I mean, like you said, there's no bigger slap in the face than to dedicate your life to defending and fighting for your country, just for that country to turn around and act like you don't exist. I mean, for them to not have their medical care covered because the government doesn't want to admit that they were involved in the reason why they got sick in the first place. Wow.
It's super shitty.
Super shitty.
And yeah, totally wrong and immoral.
God, I don't want to cry on camera. Fuck.
It's okay.
But yeah, Jake Barber also said that he had the same problem. Doctors need records to treat him, and his records were classified, so he can't get treated until the records are declassified, but the government doesn't want to declassify them because then, like I said, they'll have to admit in the shady, secret kind of stuff that they had these guys doing. And how dare they stick these dudes in the desert dirt where they knew it was radioactive because they are the ones that set the nukes off there.
Yeah, the whole thing is just back-asswards if you ask me.
Right. And I mean, same thing again happened with the Rendlesham dudes. I mean, the Rendlesham dudes had to go through a whole bunch of smoking rings and, you know, like fire loops to just get their stuff, and now they're being treated for Havana syndrome. So this also ties Havana syndrome into this whole entire thing, and it's just sickening and despicable.
I don't think they're exactly the same thing.
I mean, it may not be the exact same thing, but
very
it's
similar.
Very, very similar.
Yeah, they have very similar symptoms. Between people that have been exposed to some sort of NHI vehicle or people that have been exposed to some sort of Havana syndrome.
Right, but it's all under the same umbrella of these people working for the government, getting injured, and then the government turning their back on them when they need help because they got sick.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether it be because they were exposed to radiation soil because they were testing nukes, or whether it be because they were exposed to radiation from UAP craft that they say don't exist. Either way, the government is not doing the right thing by the people that they employed to fight for the country. And I think that is the definition of shameful.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna get through this story.
Okay.
Speaking of other shady shit that went down at Area 51, we have a tweet from Merrick von Rennenkamp that says, "Egg UAP at Area 51. Arrow witness alleges secondhand under penalty of perjury that CIA brought an egg-shaped craft to Area 51 in the 1980s. Highly cleared EG&G engineers could not gain access and concluded it was, quote, sent here from another planet," end quote. Two things I want to point out. Okay. What are the fucking chances that this company's acronym is EG&G spelling out egg, and they brought an egg-shaped craft to Area 51? That's a thing all in itself.
I never put that together, or
it's right there.
It would
Look,
be
it's
egg.
Right there.
Right. I mean, because it's always been EG&G, you know, ever since Bob Lazar's come out and said that that's the security personnel. They go through a company called EG&G to provide base security. But what if it's not just base security? What if they're, you know, one of the main contractors there?
I mean, hey, and that document that came with that tweet is very, very interesting because it basically talks about somebody that came forward to Arrow to provide testimony. They took this person's testimony. I want to read this to you because I feel like the wording on this document is extremely important. So first of all, this was from May of 2023. This was the Secretary of Defense, and like I said earlier, it was them talking about how a witness came forward to Arrow. This witness provided testimony, and I want to read to you some interesting things that stood out to me. So it said that this witness, who lived in Las Vegas, had top secret SCI security clearance with multiple program accesses, and was employed with, excuse me, it's hard to read from this angle, identified U.S. companies EG&G, we just talked about them, and JT3 and finally JT4 at Area 51 from 1997 to 2014 as a data configuration specialist and head of security for his engineering group. Prior to his work at Area 51, this person served 28 proud and patriotic years in the U.S. Air Force. And we all know that the U.S. Air Force is the ones who have the tightest lips on this whole subject to begin with. It goes on to say later on in the document, the senior engineer whose group was tasked with trying to reverse engineer the object retired shortly after this person had conversation with him. The object was described as egg-shaped, about the size of a sport utility vehicle, and silverish gray in color. Additionally, the object was smooth and seamless, had no visible control surfaces, no visible means of propulsion, and no writing or symbols of any kind. The senior engineer stated the object could not be disassembled or cut open with any of the tools available at Area 51, and X-rays could not penetrate the object. The senior engineer said for several years, his engineering group attempted to activate the object and determine a power source without any success. After exhausting all attempts and possibilities, the engineers finally concluded that the object was a probe craft sent here from another planet in the universe and was far more advanced than our current or most advanced craft.
Wow.
So there you have it. I mean, so many things going on here. Let's get back to the main point of the story, is that these vets are being denied, and that is just shameful by definition. It's like the epitome of shameful. Okay, let's move on. So if you were a government official, how would you begin to address the needs of veterans who have been exposed to potential extraterrestrial technology without any acknowledgement or care? How can we as a society support these veterans who risked everything to defend a country that now refuses to acknowledge their service? If EG&G engineers concluded that an egg-shaped craft was sent here from another planet, how does that shape our understanding of extraterrestrial technology? Sound off in the comments and let us know. Next on the docket, UFOs and nukes. What's the connection? The connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons isn't just a science fiction theory. It's a chilling reality that has been documented over decades. From strange sightings to unexplained disruptions, these incidents have raised questions about the extraterrestrial interest in our nuclear capabilities. But the story doesn't end there. Robert Salas, a former U.S. Air Force officer, has been speaking out about the UFO nuclear connection for years. On the Psicoactivo podcast, shout out Pavel, Salas discussed his personal experience with UFOs shutting down nukes at the base that he was in command of, and his theories on what this all really means for humanity. And to add an incredibly significant and poignant note to today's story, we mourn the loss of Dr. Harold Malgrim, a man who quite literally saved the world from nuclear devastation. A man who, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, convinced top military leaders to prevent a nuclear strike on the Soviet Union, ultimately averting catastrophe. His legacy lives on as we reflect on the connection between UFOs, nuclear weapons, and the importance of safeguarding our planet.
A tweet from Askapol says, in case you missed it, Matt Laszlo did a deep dive on all these UAP incursions around sensitive nuclear sites and U.S. military bases, domestically along with the UK and German bases. In this next clip from Psicoactivo podcast, we will hear from someone who was a first-hand witness to UFOs showing up over military bases and disarming the nuclear missiles that were there. Grab your popcorn and get ready for a segment I'd like to call Story Time with Salas.
Okay, so let's start with, if you're okay with that, just skimming through what happened back then at Malmstrom, because it happened in March 24, 1967. Is that okay? Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. So I was part of a two-man crew. We were considered a launch crew. I think that was our title. That would be in charge of and responsible for 10 Minuteman I missiles. And of course, these were nuclear missiles. So it was the Oscar Flight Launch Control Center is our location. The missiles were actually about a mile or two away from this location where we were, the Launch Control Center. So that evening, I was on duty as in command of the facility. And I got a phone call from my guard upstairs, the main guard. And he said, "Sir, there's strange lights flying overhead. They're flying very fast, stopping in midair, reversing course, making 90-degree turns. And they have, there's no engine noise. They're flying right above us." I said, "Wow." He said, "They are not aircraft, sir." I said, "You mean like UFOs?" I use that term because in the local newspaper in Great Falls, Montana, where we lived, there had been reports that week of lights in the sky being reported by various citizens, farmers, etc. And the word UFO came up there. It wasn't that I was focused on UFOs at the time. I had really no interest in the subject at the time. So I was joking with him, I thought, but then he very seriously said, "Sir, these are not airplanes that of any kind that I know of." I said, "Okay, well," I kind of ended the conversation there. I said, "Let me know if anything interesting happens," and basically hung up. And then 5 minutes later, he calls back, and this time he's screaming into the phone. He's obviously very frightened. He's yelling. I can't make much sense out of him. I calm him down, and then finally he says, "I've got all the guards out. Their weapons are pointed at this glowing red-orange object hovering right above the front gate." And it was a pulsating light, a very bright, pulsating red light. He wanted me to tell him what to do next. I didn't know what to think. Of course, nothing like this had ever been reported to me before. I simply told him, make sure the facility is secure, do whatever it takes to maintain security up there. And I went over to talk to my commander, who was taking a break, and started to tell him about the phone calls. But before I could say anything, really, we got a large sound going. It was really a horn going off. And that indicated that there was a problem with one of the missiles. We looked over at the status board that we had. Normally, the missiles showed green status, meaning they were ready to launch. This one was red now. There was one that was red, and then very shortly afterwards, they all went down. By down, I mean they had some kind of a failure mode.
Malfunction.
All 10 of them, yeah. And we had a way of checking the failure mode by some kind of an audio recording. And it said on each of them, guidance and control system failure. And we also had indicators showing at 2 of the launch facilities there was possible intrusion or incursion into those missile sites. And so I called up to send guards out there. Of course, I asked him about the bright red light he was looking at, and he said it just flown off, just as I called. It just flown off. So it was up there when the missiles went down. And I directed guards to go out to those facilities, 2 of them. And again, they saw the bright light over each of those 2 facilities. So they reported them there also. And then I hung up that call, and my commander turned to me after he spoke with the wing command post where he reported our incident. And he said the same thing happened at another flight. Now, the way he said it, I thought he meant that evening, but as it turned out later, it happened 8 days earlier. and that was what we'll call the Echo Flight incident. So we were at Echo Flight 8 days earlier. The same kind of thing happened, but this time UFOs were seen by security and maintenance people at two of the launch facilities, and they were right above the missile itself. And again, they shut down all 10 of their missiles. Same failure mode, guidance and control system failure. That, in a nutshell, is what happened that evening. I'll tell you, there was another incident in 1966 at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, where, again, 10 nuclear missiles were disabled during a UFO encounter. It happened in September of 1966. There was a gentleman by the name of David Shindeli, who was an officer at the time, that relieved the crew where this happened and found out this information. And he has been publicly speaking about it. So within the span of 6 months, we had 30 nuclear missiles disabled by UFOs.
Whoa.
And there have been other places in the world where UFOs have come over and interacted with nuclear weapons facilities or storage areas, simply flying over and shining a beam of light on where the weapons were stored. I list about 13 instances total in my books that I've written, and there have been many more that have been unreported. So to me, and I believe these are not human operators of these UFOs, are giving us a message, and that message is get rid of these weapons. They're not even weapons, because we'd never use them in wartime, but get rid of these, otherwise we are going to destroy civilization as we know it.
You think that's the message? It's like a threat towards humanity?
I wouldn't call it a threat. No, I would call it a warning to us to take care, to rid ourselves of these weapons so that they won't be used by us to destroy every living thing on this planet. The message I think they are sending is one of a warning to us that of the extreme risk we are taking by having these weapons, that they will eventually be used by us. Our government has not, as we just talked about, chosen to acknowledge these incidents. However, I can say that I gave my testimony to the All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, Arrow.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that. What was that experience like? Did you speak to Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick directly, or?
No, I didn't speak to him directly. I spoke to people that were working for him at the time. I gave a 2.5-hour presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation, which had images of 22 documents or pieces of evidence that I've accumulated supporting the two incidents at Malmstrom, Echo Flight and Oscar Flight, including audio recordings of the witnesses and affidavits, etc. At the end of that, they asked me a couple more questions, and then I said, "Can I ask a question?" And I said, "Will you be asking the Air Force to validate anything I've told you?" And their answer was no, because they had tried to validate facts when they interviewed, I think it was Robert Jacobs, and his incident. The Air Force, we couldn't find anyone in the Air Force that had any knowledge of it. And so basically they were a little frustrated that the Air Force wasn't supplying them with a knowledge of any of these incidents, which I guess to this day, that's still the Air Force stance.
Yeah.
We know nothing. So it's really up to, it's going to take a strong effort by Congress, maybe even intervention by the president to force this information to come out.
Why do you think the phenomenon seems to be attracted to nuclear energy? Do you think it's because they're trying to warn us, or do you think they're attracted to it in some way?
All right. What I think is, if these beings are as advanced as we think they are, in their evolutionary stages, I'm sure they've had, well, I'm not sure, but I think they've probably had their own problems with weaponry, possibly fighting among themselves, as we seem to do a lot in war. And they have gone through the whole process of even developing nuclear weapons themselves, and they understand, let's say, the stupidity of doing that, and how much harm it could do. There have been some indications by communications with these beings by experiencers that our testing of nuclear weapons, even our testing, affects them in some way. It affects other life forms in other parts of our solar system and our universe. So I think they're very interested in seeing that we try to eliminate these weapons ourselves. Of course, they have shown that they can disable them at times. But I think the better option is for we to evolve to the point, or our consciousness to understand that we have to take care of this ourselves, and that we would be then better prepared, really, to meet other life forms out there, advanced life forms, and in peace, in a peaceful way.
Yeah, so it's part of that maturing process that civilization has to go through, right?
Right, exactly.
So I think his story is a very interesting story. I always like to hear it. I think that the message is a good message. It's one of that we need to get rid of nuclear weapons, which I totally agree with. So yeah, I don't know. I like his story. What do you think?
I mean, I have to give mad props to Pavel, because that was a fire interview. It was like over an hour and something minute long, and it was like really, really hard to like edit down the clip that I was trying to make, because he just kept bringing up all these really cool, interesting points. I mean, the fact that he was talking about that the word UFO was on his brain because it had appeared in the newspaper, because 6 days prior they had some sort of sighting, so UFOs was in the newspaper. Then he goes and says how over a course of 6 months that these UFOs had shut down over 30 nukes. I mean, hello, like that's obviously more than just a coincidence. You know what I'm saying? That's way more than a coincidence.
I wonder if that's still going on to this day.
I mean, maybe that's what the recent drone flap is.
Oh, yeah. Good point. Maybe
that's what the recent drone flap is about. I don't know. Something else I want to mention is that because that interview with Robert Salas was so fire, I also have another bonus story time with Salas clip that I'm going to feature at the end of the show. So make sure to stay till the end of the show, where he shares his personal abduction experience and his own personal encounters with ETs that him and his wife experienced. So shout out to Pavel again for that fire interview, and make sure to stay tuned to the very, very end to catch that story of Robert Salas telling us about his abduction experience.
And to keep in line with talking about people with first-hand nuclear experiences, we are saddened to read this next tweet from Pippa Malgrim that says, It is with great sadness to announce that my father, the Honorable Dr. Harold Malgrum, has passed from us. He was an advisor to many presidents and global leaders. He had many important accomplishments. At age 27, he successfully prevented General Curtis LeMay and the Joint Chiefs from dropping a nuclear weapon on the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis, thus averting a nuclear catastrophe. He also advised Toyota to start making cars inside the U.S. at a time when everyone else was offshoring. There is more on his life and his wisdom coming. Thanks to American Alchemy as well, who filmed him before he passed. Thankfully, his passing was peaceful. He loved Twitter and asked me to send thanks to all his followers. Harold B. Malgrum, July 13th, 1935 to February 13th, 2025.
Let's share a moment of silence. Thank you. In an interesting twist, Jesse Michaels from American Alchemy replied back with this tweet. This was the greatest honor of my life. Harold Malgrum literally saved the world from nuclear devastation, not an exaggeration. And heads of state around the world saw him as a trusted, reliable partner. We all owe him a great debt. And I personally want to thank his incredible daughter Pippa for the opportunity to be a small part of this great man's life and document what I could. I will work harder on this than any project I have prior. His story is more profound than anyone understands. I can say with certainty, please send your prayers to Pippa and her family. So lots of love and thoughts and good vibes going to Pippa and her family. I know you guys are going through a difficult time right now, and we just want to send you our love. But back to the conversation, specifically referring to us playing around with nukes. Humans, knock it off. Put the matches down, get out the forest, and go do something constructive, please. Like, we need to stop effing around and trying to blow each other up. Like, there's nobody wins when you have war. Literally nobody wins.
Right. Yeah.
There's always devastation on no matter what you do, and yeah.
I mean, that nuclear war, just the thought of it is so scary.
Really?
Because, I mean, literally nobody wins.
I know.
And, I mean, everybody and everything would most likely end up dying or coming very close to being extinct. I mean, it's just, it's horrible to even think about.
I know. Salas talked about how one of the first bombs that they dropped killed like 100K people. And then the next ones that they dropped killed 2 to 3 times that amount. So that's like 400,000 people, if you add that all up. Plus you want to add in all of the wildlife that is unaccounted for in that scenario. And then let's talk about how long that type of poison and radiation and toxicity stays within the environment. It doesn't go away, you guys.
No, which is why those...
It doesn't go away.
Which is why those veterans got sick working at
and not
Area 51.
only those veterans, but those veterans' children. So it like stays with you genetically. So like, can we just please all get along?
Yeah. Oh, and also not to... we can't forget to mention that Bob Salas alluded to nuclear weapons ripping across dimensions or space-time and affecting NHI. And that could be a possible reason why they're so interested in these weapons.
Right. And for everybody that wants to say how aggressive these NHI are and how we have to defend ourselves against them, my guy, they're trying to defend us from us. They're turning the nukes off. They're disabling them. They're making them so that they cannot be launched. If they wanted to harm us, don't you think they would set them off instead of keeping us from setting them off? I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying. All right. Go ahead.
As we reflect on Dr. Malgrum's efforts to avoid nuclear war, do you believe UFOs may have played an unrecognized role in preventing global catastrophe? Given the recent increase in UFO sightings near nuclear facilities, do you think this is a sign of extraterrestrial monitoring or a message to do better? Make sure to go to the Leto Files Discord server and share your thoughts with the community there. An invite link can be found in the video description box below, along with all of the other sources that are featured in this show, in the order that they appear, so make sure to check that out.
Next up, Dr. Greer, Gary McKinnon, and 0 Point Energy. The fight for disclosure continues. Love him or hate him, there's one thing we can all agree upon. Dr. Stephen Greer never holds back when it comes to speaking his mind about UFO disclosure. And in this next story, we're exploring what he refers to as catastrophic disclosure, the kind of truth that could shake the foundation of reality itself. But Dr. Greer isn't the only one making waves. The infamous hacker, Gary McKinnon, might be back, and this time it's with a vengeance and some serious revelations. You may remember that McKinnon made headlines when he hacked into NASA and the Pentagon servers in the early 2000s, exposing secret UFO information and free energy tech. So what does all this mean for disclosure, and how does it all tie together? We're about to find out. Stay with us as we explore the intersection of catastrophic disclosure, free energy, and the return of Gary McKinnon.
A tweet from NCI University says, "Got to spend a little time with Dr. Stephen Greer last night." In this next clip, we'll hear Dr. Stephen Greer define catastrophic disclosure.
But before we show that clip, I want to let you guys know that the person who's in that picture with Dr. Stephen Greer is Chase Hughes, who we've mentioned on the show before. He's a former Navy intelligence who specialized in human behavior and interrogation and stuff like that. Recently, he said that he'd watched Stephen Greer's interview on Jack Dorsey and found him to be truthful, unlike others, which was probably / maybe a reference to Lou, who's also been on Dorsey. I don't know. He's also made videos about MK Ultra, which is about to be super relevant given the recent MLK and JFK RFK release file situation. And I really enjoyed that video that he did about how to recognize a psyop. If you haven't watched that video yet, watch it, because I guarantee you'll be looking through different eyes after you do. Okay, so in this next clip, we'll hear from Greer himself about what his definition of catastrophic disclosure is and how zero-point energy could revolutionize the entire planet overnight.
What I'm calling catastrophic disclosure is what we're on the verge of if we're not careful. And let me go back a few months when I was talking to some folks after the current president was elected. And one of the discussions was that if this comes forward in a way that has been planned for decades, that it would be catastrophic, that it would be much worse than COVID, much worse than 9/11. And that's what I'm calling catastrophic disclosure. It's not the release of the evidence and information that almost all Americans sense at this point is out there. I mean, more people believe that we've been visited and the government's been hiding things for decades than have voted for any president in modern times. I mean, it's up in the 60% plus range. So, I mean, even the Reagan landslide didn't have those sort of numbers, and very few members of Congress have those sort of numbers. So what it really is, and this is, I think, what happens when you have people who are embedded in government who try to keep putting speed bumps in the way of this information coming out, and with it, the technologies, is that they keep trying to say, oh, you know, it's just too much and the people can't handle it. That's not true. The people would love it. Here's who can't handle it, is the permanent bureaucracy of corrupt interest, both in the military-industrial complex, but more importantly, the financial complex. The technologies, even the energy, zero-point quantum vacuum technologies can't come out because you've got hundreds of trillions of dollars in invested interest in commodities and oil. It should have come out 100 years ago. That's why we did our film, The Lost Century, to illustrate this. What is really catastrophic is this not coming out, or, which is what's afoot, and we'll talk about this, is that it comes out exactly the way they've been planning for 70 years, since the 1950s, where it comes out as an existential threat to humanity, that there are these forces out there, they're calling them NHI now, which is, of course, you know, the pop culture intelligence term that got concocted for reasons we've already discussed. It's basically a cover-up term. But that it comes out and they present it as a threat to national security and a threat to the human species. And that is exactly what catastrophic disclosure is. And there are real victims of abductions. I was almost abducted in 1994. Those are being done by humans masquerading as aliens. But they're also using these technologies to do it. They're using craft that look like an alien ship. They're using technologies that are very advanced electronics, like supercharged Havana syndrome type energy weapons. that affect awareness and consciousness and all sorts of things. So those are being used by people who are masquerading as aliens and then convincing officials that there's this threat. But that falls apart if there's an honest disclosure, and that is that there are three things going on. There's the extraterrestrial vehicles and people, there's the man-made craft and man-made alien phenomenon, and then there's the extra-dimensional or interdimensional beings that they deliberately mix up with both the extraterrestrial and the man-made. Some of the extra-dimensional entities are actually able to be brought into this dimension through very advanced electromagnetic systems. And I know physicists and engineers who have done this. It sounds like something out of Stranger Things because it is like that. That's where they got the idea from the movie, the whole Montauk experiments and all that on Long Island, back on the eastern part of the far eastern edge of Long Island. So when you begin to analyze this, the denial that we have these technologies opens up only one conclusion for all this other phenomenon. It's all got to be non-human. It's all got to be done by the aliens. So by denying that we have these technologies, we have these craft, it sets everyone up for coming to one logical conclusion. People have been abducted. There have been mutilations of cattle. All of that, therefore, goes through that open door, even though it's a completely false narrative. And that's why repeatedly these counterintelligence officials go around and say, we don't have anything like this. There's no way. Because as soon as they acknowledge we do, it's not hard to then make the connection from the whistleblowers we have to say, oh, well, these have been used in these counterintelligence operations, psychological warfare, psyops. And that's then, of course, inescapable that people realize, well, gee, what part of this is actually non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial, and what part of it has been masquerading? No one's asking that question. And most people in Congress and the bureaucracy or White House and national security don't know enough about the issue yet to come to that kind of assessment, which is why it's so important that we keep putting this information in front of them. So I think that the catastrophic disclosure is that hiding that keeps the technologies that would benefit the Earth away, because they say, well, we don't know how they operate. We don't know what zero-point energy is. Nothing like that's ever been built. Total fabricated, bold-faced lies. That leaves us dependent as a civilization on an 1800s energy paradigm for our energy system, which not only it requires most of the population of the world to be impoverished to some degree, but also under control of a centralized system. So it's actually a type of, I call it petro-slavery, where the whole planet is dependent on the fossil fuel and the centralized power grid to have their very existence, to even live as we live as a modern society. That would all change if these technologies came out. It would be the ultimate liberation of all people in all strata of societies, both in the United States and the developed countries and the so-called first world, but in the developing world even more so. But all of us would be liberated. So that is a very dangerous game being played. And that is how we have catastrophic disclosure. This information comes out, but it's all portrayed as this one thing, non-human, as a catch-all, and that the staged and faked alien terrifying events all fall under that one category falsely. That then leads to an inescapable policy decision by the Congress and the White House, and that is we have to, and other leaders around the world, we have to unite the world to fight the aliens. We have to have this sort of dystopian of a future where it's us against them, this sort of crazy narrative of endless war that expands to not just humans fighting each other, whether it be Russia and Ukraine or whatever it is, but that we then unite everyone against some external alien threat. And this is exactly what Wernher von Braun talked about on his deathbed, and others have warned me about, and that they have the ability to stage it. So catastrophic disclosure is actually attaching very high value targets, let's call them HVTs, in terms of whistleblowers. And they come out, they provide the information, and eventually, I think in the next year or so, all the proof that we're not alone and we have these craft that are non-human.
So it never ceases to amaze me how much Dr. Greer can talk. To be honest, he's a talker for sure. I think back to when Chris Lato interviewed him, and he barely got
2 words
like
in.
5 questions in the whole interview. I don't know. It was kind of funny. But he does bring up a couple of really good points that I do agree with.
What's that?
I do think that we need to get away from fossil fuels because they are damaging the environment, and the whole industry of fossil fuels is in place to keep a very few amount of people very rich, and keep everybody else living in poverty, like he said.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely think that the whole energy revolution needs to come about.
The energy revolution aspect to it is huge. And I mean, like he said in his documentary called The Lost Century, if you haven't seen that and don't understand what we're talking about, I highly recommend going and watching that, because he explains it and lays it out pretty flat and clear for you. And like this is reminding me of when Nikola Tesla died. And Nikola Tesla had all those patents and all those ideas for energy that could be tapped into just by sticking these big radio tower things in the earth, and then literally like setting up a bunch of them all over the world, and then energy could pass between those very easily and freely. And who was it? Was it fucking Thomas Edison that didn't like his ideas or his energy products or his energy patents because it would like literally...
He couldn't sell it. If you gave people free energy, if you gave people a way to tap into energy that's just in the environment,
then there's no way
for them to charge people for it.
Right, but what I'm saying is Thomas Edison was the one who was directly in competition with Tesla's ideas, because Thomas Edison was making money off of charging people for electricity and all this other stuff. And I learned something watching a recent documentary about Nikola Tesla and this Thomas Edison thing that really made me mad. I was mad for a long time.
That?
Like, where they electrocuted the elephants and the cats and the dogs just to display how dangerous Nikola Tesla's work was. Meanwhile, it was all just a ploy to keep Thomas Edison employed. Don't even get me started on animal cruelty and abuse and exploitation. But anyways, so yes, Greer does bring up very good points. And then he also brings up some things where I'm kind of like, I don't know about all that. I have a lot of respect for Stephen Greer. I always feel the need to reiterate that before I talk a little bit of smack. But I find it very hard to believe, or I don't know, maybe the idea is just too big for my brain to get around, that all of these, basically what he's saying is that like anything negative that happens, whether it's an abduction or some kind of something, that's always humans. It's never bad aliens. It's always bad humans. And I don't know. I feel like if like that NHI are a lot like us, to where we all have good in us, we all have evil in us. It's just a matter of how you portray yourself in the world, how you act, and like what you do with your life. You know what I mean? Like I could be the biggest bee in the world, or I could be the me that I choose to be. You know what I'm saying? It's both in there. It's just a matter of how I express myself. So I don't understand all that. I'm not going to say I don't agree with it. I'll just say I don't understand all that. I don't know what he knows that I don't know that makes him think that that's not even a possibility.
Well, I think it's more so the fact that he speaks in absolutes sometimes.
Right. And that anybody that doesn't know what he knows isn't good enough to be speaking about it, kind of thing. But again, I will go back to the fact that I really do appreciate that he doesn't want planet Earth to suffer anymore. He doesn't want us to be lied to anymore. He wants us to be told the truth. He wants these patents and energies to come forward that can revolutionize the planet overnight. No more poverty, no more pollution, no more ruining the planet, fracking and drilling and mining and all this other crap. And he wants us to be able to be the type of species that can have a positive relationship with who these NHI might be. He doesn't want us to be constantly warring with each other, and then in the event that we do unite, it's against somebody. Like, we just need to just stop with all the warring and against anything, and realize we're all one. We all come from the same source. So it's like, get with the program of peace, love, unity, respect. Peace, love, unity, respect. Peace, love, unity, respect. I wish I could play that song as the outro, but I have a feeling it's probably copyrighted. So I found a new song that I'm obsessed with. But anyways,
could you imagine what the world would be like if everybody had access to quote unquote 0 point energy?
It would be a completely different planet. It would be a completely different planet. And that is what Stephen Greer is fighting for. He wants us to be in that environment where everybody has abundance, where everybody's basic needs as a human being are met. And if that happens, there's no real need to fight with each other anymore because everybody's getting what they want anyway. So it's like, that's what I love about Greer, and I'll stand by that. I don't care who doesn't like him. I don't care who says they're not going to listen to him anymore. I don't care who says he's a whatever, fill in the blank with whatever word you put in there. I respect Stephen Greer. I respect that he fights for the planet. I respect that he fights for us to be a peaceful species that can commune with NHI. And yeah, peace, love, unity, respect. Peace, love, unity, respect.
Yeah. I feel like it's important to also say that that we also highly respect Lou Elizondo.
Yes.
And I know that we have like 2 camps going on right now.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, where, everybody that's in Lou's camp doesn't really like Dr. Greer. Everybody that's in Dr. Greer's camp doesn't like Lou.
Well, F all that. I'm in the Switzerland camp. White flags all around here.
Exactly.
I'm neutral,
I think we should come together. And I mean, I really mean that.
I do too. And I feel like we need to stop finding new ways to create new camps and just throw down the fences that divide and keep these camps separate and realize like we're all one. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, he threw shade at Elizondo. He threw shade at Mellon. He threw shade at Tom DeLonge. He threw shade at Ross Coldhart, Leslie Keane, Gary. The list goes on. His new podcast is all about throwing shade at everybody that's not him. But again, like I said, he fights for disclosure. He fights for peace, love, unity, respect. And he fights for us to have a positive relationship with NHI, communing with them peacefully.
Right. And to live harmoniously with the environment.
Yes.
So
all things I can get behind.
Right. Exactly.
All right. And speaking of 0 point energy or free energy, let's take a look at this next tweet from Vicky Verma that says, the famous UFO hacker Gary McKinnon says he's back. He'll be sharing exclusive content soon. Now, keep in mind this tweet was from January, which was only last month, but I don't know what soon means. Anyways, he says, at the beginning of 2000, Gary McKinnon, the famous British hacker, claimed that he got so fed up with the government hiding information related to UFOs and free energy that he decided to hack the most secured servers of NASA and the Pentagon. McKinnon said that he found evidence of the following. Number 1, information about the development of a secret space fleet and inexhaustible source of power existed for these secret spaceships. Whoa.
0 point energy?
Much, you think? Number 2, he said that he had seen real photographs of UFOs in computer files at the Johnson Space Center building. He even took a screenshot of one of the Sakara-shaped UFOs in between space and Earth's atmosphere. Unfortunately, though, it was removed from his computer after it was seized. And number 3, interestingly, before releasing any photos, he said that the government had used Photoshop to edit out the UFOs from them. We all know NASA scrubs their pictures. That's not anything new.
Yeah, I've heard that since the early 2000s.
And it's true. They do. Just like they scrub the Google Maps pictures of what's going on near Catalina Island. Same thing.
Just like they quickly shut off the live camera feeds from the International Space Station when something mysterious comes into view.
That too. That too. So yeah, I don't know what shadows Gary McKinnon has been lurking in and when he plans to poke his head out and reveal some new stuff, but it sounds like the guy might have a secret hard drive stashed somewhere that they didn't get yet. I don't know what's going on with this, but I'm here for it. I mean, if this man makes a comeback, I mean, shoot, I'm curious to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, me too.
So with both Dr. Greer and Gary McKinnon pushing for UFO and free energy disclosure, what do you think the government is hiding? Is it possible they've known about these technologies for decades? Could 0 point energy be the breakthrough we need to change the world's energy crisis? Sound off in the comment section and let us know.
And last but certainly not least, a history of USOs Volume 1, Richard Dolan's deep dive into USOs. Get ready to dive into the deep blue with one of the leading authorities on UFOs and USOs, Richard Dolan. In this next story, Dolan unveils the first volume of his long-awaited work, A History of USOs, which chronicles nearly 700 cases of unidentified submerged objects. This collection will take you on a journey through time, uncovering astonishing encounters that have remained hidden in the shadows until now. As the truth about these mysterious phenomena emerge, Dolan explores cases from all over the world, highlighting encounters that are as perplexing as they are profound. Get ready to expand your understanding of the UFO phenomena beyond the skies and into the oceans.
A tweet from J. Christopher King reads, Richard Dolan's long-awaited A History of USOs Volume 1 Beginnings to 1969 will be released this week with various editions available online as soon as tomorrow. This has been in the works for quite a while and will surely be an important reference for researchers in the field for many years to come. Dolan has rightfully achieved his reputation as one of our best living historians of anomalous inquiry through his groundbreaking UFOs and the National Security State series and other works. From Richard, quote, it's officially 392 pages, fully illustrated, maps for every case with extensive data analysis, historical context, and, to me, most importantly, vivid and accurate portrayals of 178 USO cases through the end of 1969, end quote. Okay, so in this next clip from his most recent YouTube video, we'll hear from Richard Dolan himself talking about his highly anticipated book.
So anyway, I'm here today to talk about my latest book. Yes, I am an author who wants to promote his work, that's right. But the truth is, I loved writing this book, this project, and I'm still involved in it since the book I've just published is only volume 1 of a 3-volume series. This project is something that took on a life of its own. It's the first truly comprehensive history of USOs, that is, unidentified submerged objects. It's a project I have been working on for 3 years. It started in the form of a large number of USO videos I did for my website, richardolanmembers.com, but pretty soon into it, I thought this needs to be a book, and so here we are. I'm glad about the timing of this book. We're in a new place in our public discussion of UFOs or UAP, and much of that discussion has moved into a conversation about USOs. And for good reason, by the way. The oceans have been neglected for the most part in all of this. And even in the past, UFO researchers, while they did recognize that a lot of activity seemed to be happening in bodies of water, for whatever reason, hardly ever anyone really pursued this part of the phenomenon as a distinct unit of study and analysis. So this is a history of USOs. And the book I've just published is volume 1 of that series. It covers from the beginnings to the end of 1969. For the record, all cases from all volumes have already been written. I've finished all of that. Volume 2 will cover all of the 1970s and 1980s, while Volume 3 will cover all cases from 1990 through 2024. In total, I have 672 USO cases in these 3 volumes. And the second and third volumes should definitely be out and published during this year, probably the first half of this year. So let me tell you why I think this is an important study. The first thing I should say is that when I began methodically to hunt down and assess the thousands of potential cases for inclusion in this study, I was completely blown away by one thing, that these incredible cases were completely forgotten, not just by the general public, but even by most dedicated researchers. What was amazing to me were how extraordinary each one of these accounts was. It's hard for me to convey just how hard this hit me at the time. I've spent 30 years studying UFO cases. Believe me, I have read thousands upon thousands of fascinating encounters, dramatic, even shocking. But these cases, nearly all of them were new to me. Yes, there are a few that are sort of well known, a few historical cases that many people do know about. Shag Harbor case of 1967. Absolutely. The USS Nimitz case, that is the Tic Tac UFO case. Because there is a USO element to that, at least that's what I believe based on various witness accounts. So there are a few others beyond this as well. So this volume that I've just published contains cases that I've collected from the earliest ones that I think are really useful to study through the end of 1969. That seems like a long time ago to some of you. You might think, who cares? about these old cases. What's going on today? Well, what's going on today is, of course, very important. And don't worry, I have a book on that coming soon. But these older cases are quite simply amazing. In my opinion, each one of them is a unique drama. You could literally make a full-length movie about many of them, and I'd bet you could make a good 30-minute documentary about any one of them, or longer than 30 minutes in many of the cases. They are extraordinary.
Okay, so there you have it. The first of a 3-volume series is out now. And I have included in the video description box below Richard Dolan's website link. Actually, let me not lie to you. Hold on. Let me tell you what I have. Give me 1 second. Okay, so in the video description box below, I have a link to that video, which I highly recommend you guys go back and watch the whole thing, because not only does he say what he just said, but he also then goes into include some of the actual stories where he shows you the picture and he goes through the account, the recount of the story. So there's lots of cool stuff. It's like that video is a really cool preview to what's in the book. So highly recommend going and watching that. Then I also have the link to where you can purchase the books. And then I also have another link where you can get a free download of Richard Dolan's USO spreadsheet.
That sounds very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think those older stories are still important.
Sure, of course.
You know, and I'm happy that he wrote a book about it, and we will be getting that book.
Okay, very cool. And while we're talking about manifesting things, I'm also going to send an invitation to Richard Dolan to come onto the show to be a guest to talk about this book. So, you know, manifestation in progress. Stay tuned. All right, so what's your take on the idea that UFOs may not only be coming from space, but also from the depths of our oceans? Do you believe that the existence of USOs could change the way we think about our oceans and the creatures that inhabit them? How do you think our perception of extraterrestrial life would change if we acknowledged USOs as a significant part of the phenomenon? Let us know in the comment section below.
And that concludes this week's UAP Society's UAP UFO News Show. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, and while you're here, do us a favor and smash that like button, click subscribe, ring that notification bell, leave us a lovely comment down below, and share this video with your family and friends to help us spread the good word.
Let's raise the collective consciousness together in unity. All right.
Much love,
peace, and namaste. And stay tuned for that bonus scene of Story Time with Salas, where he shares his personal abduction experience.
But in 1985, I was in this particular house that I remember living in Manhattan Beach, California, with my wife and 2 small children. And that evening, we had all gone to bed, and I suddenly woke up and noticed there was a bluish light coming from our living room. And I woke my wife up, and I pointed to the light, and she said she saw it also. And I said, I'm going to have to get up and investigate. Obviously, it could be someone in the house, because we had no blue lights in the living room. But as I started to get up, I became paralyzed. And I remember struggling with all the strength I had to try to recover my mobility, but I couldn't move. At one point, I asked my wife for help. I couldn't move, and now she was unconscious. The next thing, I saw a figure in the doorway. It looked somewhat like a human, but I couldn't make out its face. It had a hood on. I could see that, but other than that, I can't tell you any more at this point. By the way, what I'm telling you is based on 4 sessions of hypnotic therapy that I've had to recover these memories. So, next thing I recall is there were small beings in the room, our bedroom. They seemed like children to me at the time. I had no perspective on any kind of non-humans, but they seemed like children, small children. And I didn't know what they were doing there, but soon I was being lifted off the bed, rising up off the bed and floating. And then somehow they floated me towards the bedroom window, which I had locked that night, and it was latched. It was a latch up there, and I thought they couldn't even reach the latch if they were going to take me out the window, but they didn't bother with that. They took me right through the window.
That's wild.
And again, this is memories I've recovered under therapy. But I know it sounds ridiculous, but
no,
I went right through the window without breaking any glass, anything like that.
Do you think it might be possible that based on the studies that have already been done about astral projection, that they may have taken just like your astral self and left your body there? That's what happened, right? That's what it sounds like it happened.
I don't know. I don't know anything about astral projection, but like I say, I've got an open mind, more of an open mind now as to what can happen with these.
Yeah.
This the next thing I recalled was being on a table, like a operating table, likely inside a craft, and I was being shown a long needle, very long needle, and it was held right in front of my eyes. It was placed right in front of my eyes and held by these long, bony fingers. And they communicated to me telepathically that they were going to insert this into my groin area and it wouldn't hurt, as they said, but as they started to do that, it hurt like it was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And that's the second reason I'm certain this was not a dream. First reason was my struggle with the paralysis. I remember struggling and working so hard physically. I remember that effort I made to recover my mobility, but I never did. The second reason was this pain. So they performed this procedure. It hurt like hell. I communicated that, and the pain went away almost instantly. Then I was taken to another cubicle, turned around by a small being, and he poked two fingers down my spine like that. There was no pain involved there. That's all he did. Turned me around. And they floated me. I was floating the whole time. I wasn't walking along a curved corridor, and then bright light at the end, and I was back in my bed. The next morning, like I said, I didn't remember any of this. My wife didn't remember any of it at all. We never spoke of it until about 2009, I think.